The Cerathian citadel stood like a shining crystal mountain above the clouds of the planet Virelia. Its tall towers glowed with blue light, and its walls shimmered like diamonds under the twin suns. For centuries it had been the heart of the Cerathian Empire, a place of pride, power, and peace. But now it trembled under fire. Explosions tore through the sky. Enemy ships, dark and sharp like daggers, poured down energy beams that broke through the once strong defense shields. The air was filled with the deep roar of destruction, and the ground shook as if the world itself was breaking apart. Inside the main hall, Queen Verathil Serathis stood at the center of her throne room. Her silver crown caught the flickering lights from burning fires. She was tall and graceful, with bright violet eyes that once inspired loyalty in millions. Around her, alarms blared, and the air smelled of smoke and ozone. Her royal guards, 12 Cerathian elites clad in shining armor, formed a ring around her. Their energy blades buzzed as they waited for orders. The queen's calm voice echoed through the chaos. "Hold your ground," she said. "The enemy will not breach the inner gates." But even as she spoke, the walls shook again. A new explosion tore through the lower levels, and the sound of panic spread from the corridors. The guards glanced at each other. Fear began to take hold. From the far end of the hall, a human voice shouted, "Your Majesty, the southern defense is gone. We have to move now." The voice belonged to Sergeant James Arden, the only human soldier in the Queen's personal guard. He was tall, strong, and calm, wearing standard Terran combat armor, dark, battle-worn, and far less beautiful than Cerathian armor. His helmet visor showed lines of tactical data glowing in blue. Queen Vera turned to him, her voice steady. "This citadel is the heart of my people. I will not abandon it." James stepped closer, his voice firm but respectful. "If you stay here, there won't be a heart left to rule. They're targeting you, not your walls." The Queen hesitated. She was proud. The last ruler of a great line. She had never known defeat, never fled from battle. But when another blast rocked the chamber and pieces of crystal ceiling crashed down, her guards broke rank. "The shields are down," one guard cried. "We're finished." "Fall back to the escape tunnels," shouted another. "Wait." The Queen called, but they didn't listen. One by one, her guards activated their teleport bands, vanishing in bright flashes of light. In seconds, the hall was empty except for her and the human soldier. Vera stood frozen, her silver crown slightly tilted from the shockwave. They left me," she whispered. James looked at her. No crown, no title mattered in that moment. Only survival. He reloaded his rifle and said, "Then it's just us, Your Majesty. Let's move." They ran through corridors filled with fire and smoke. The once beautiful crystal walls were cracked and burning. The floors trembled with every hit from above. The soft glow of royal lights had turned red, emergency color. James led the way, his visor mapping routes through collapsing halls. He used his rifle to shoot open jammed doors and override security panels. Behind him, the Queen followed, her long cloak torn and covered with ash. She tried to reach her commanders through her psychic link, but the energy fields from the enemy ships jammed her thoughts. Her mind, once able to touch millions, now felt trapped and silent. "Human," she said as they moved through a smoke-filled corridor. "Why do you stay?" The others ran. "You could have escaped too." James didn't slow down. "Because my orders were to protect you. Orders don't change just because things get messy." Her eyes narrowed. "Orders?" "Yeah," he said, glancing back at her with a faint grin. "Humans take that kind of thing seriously." She looked at him curiously. "Your people are strange. You face death with jokes," he chuckled quietly.
"Maybe that's how we stay sane." They reached the lower hangar bay, or what was left of it.
Half the ceiling had collapsed and several ships were in flames. Alarms wailed everywhere. Through the shattered windows, they could see the enemy fleet above. Dozens of dark ships raining fire on the planet below. James quickly scanned the area. Most of the shuttles are gone or destroyed. But there, that one might still work. He pointed to a small scout ship resting crookedly against the far wall. It was smoking, but mostly intact. They sprinted across the hangar, ducking behind fallen debris as enemy drones swooped in through the broken roof. The drones fired plasma bolts, lighting the room with flashes of white heat. James returned fire, his rifle humming as he shot them one by one. The Queen covered her head as energy blasts tore through the air. "Can you not disable them faster?" she called. James grinned. I'm trying, Your Majesty. Maybe you could use your mind tricks? Her tone turned sharp. My mind is blocked by their interference fields. Then guess we'll do this the old-fashioned way, he said and threw a grenade. The explosion took out the last 3 drones. When the smoke cleared, James motioned her toward the shuttle. Go, I'll cover you. She climbed inside, hands trembling slightly. The ship smelled of burnt metal and smoke. She sat at the co-pilot's seat while James jumped into the pilot's chair. You can fly this? She asked, surprised. He gave a short laugh. I can fly anything that has a stick and thrusters. The ship's systems flickered to life. Warning lights flashed across the console. Engines damaged, an AI voice announced. James hit a few switches, muttering to himself. We just need them to last 5 minutes. The hangar doors were half closed, jammed from damage. James aimed the ship's cannons and fired, blowing them open. Then he pushed the throttle. The shuttle shot forward, rising through the burning sky as the citadel collapsed below. From above, the once glorious Sarathian capital looked like a broken jewel. Rivers of fire ran through its streets. The towers that had touched the clouds were now falling, one by one. Queen Vera sat silently, watching the world she loved die. My people, she whispered. They trusted me to protect them. James didn't look back. You're still breathing. That means there's still something to protect. She turned to him. You think a single human and a broken queen can save a fallen empire? He gave a faint smile. One step at a time, Your Majesty. First we survive, then we figure out the rest. The ship shook violently as enemy interceptors locked onto them. Red warning signs flashed across the console. James gritted his teeth and turned sharply, flying into a cloud of debris to lose them. For the next few minutes, silence filled the cockpit except for the sound of alarms and the hum of engines. Finally, the scanner showed the enemy losing track of them. James leaned back slightly, breathing hard. We made it out. For now. The Queen looked at him, studying his tired face and calm eyes. She had met many warriors, but none like him. One who stayed not out of duty to power or pride, but because he chose to. Tell me, Sergeant Arden, she said softly. Why do humans fight like this, even when they have no chance? He glanced at her and shrugged. Because giving up isn't really in our nature. For a long moment, neither spoke. Outside the window, the stars stretched endlessly, cold, distant, and silent. Behind them, the citadel burned, its light fading into the night. Queen Vera lowered her gaze, feeling the weight of her loss. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the sorrow, a new thought began to form. A small, fragile spark of hope. Maybe this human's strange courage was something her people had forgotten long ago. Maybe, just maybe, it was what could save them all. The shuttle's engine screamed as it tore through the smoky skies of Virelia. Every alarm in the cockpit flashed red. The small craft shook under heavy turbulence, warning lights blinking like angry eyes. Sergeant James Arden gripped the flight controls tightly. Sweat ran down his forehead beneath the helmet. Hold together, girl, he muttered to the ship as if it could hear him. Beside him, Queen Vera Thil-Sarathis sat straight in her seat, watching the burning capital grow smaller behind them. Her face was calm, but her eyes, bright and violet, were full of sorrow. The great citadel of her ancestors was gone. The pride of her people had turned into a storm of fire and dust. The shuttle rattled again as something exploded outside. What was that? She asked quickly. Enemy interceptors, James replied, scanning his radar. They've locked onto us. 3 ships, no 4. The Queen's hands clenched the edge of her seat. Can you outfly them? He gave a short, dry laugh. I can try. The enemy fighters came fast, dark shapes slicing through the clouds. They fired streams of blue plasma, each shot bright enough to blind the eyes. The shuttle shook as one blast grazed the left wing. Sparks flew inside the cabin. Shields are failing, the ship's AI voice called out. I noticed, James said through clenched teeth. He dove sharply, the shuttle spinning through the smoke. Debris from burning towers rushed past them. A fighter overshot its aim and slammed into a broken bridge, vanishing in a flash of fire. Vera held onto the seat as the ship rolled upside down for a moment. Her crown slipped off and fell to the floor with a soft clang. James steadied the ship and shouted, We lost 1. 3 left. Her voice was tight but steady. If we continue like this, they will destroy us. Not if we're smarter than they are, he said. James pulled the shuttle into the low atmosphere, where clouds mixed with smoke and fire. The city below looked like a dying sun. He guided the craft through tight spaces, under collapsing bridges and through ruins of golden towers. The enemy followed, firing wildly, but their plasma bolts hit the buildings instead of the shuttle. The Queen turned her head to him. "You are risking everything," he smiled faintly. "That's how humans make miracles happen." One more blast hit the rear hull and the console sparked. Warning signs filled the screen. "Engine temperature critical," the AI said. James ignored it. "We're almost clear of the city. Once we reach the high atmosphere, I'll take us into orbit." The Queen looked out the window. The stars were already visible above the smoke. "And then?" she asked softly. "Then we find somewhere to hide," he answered. "Someplace they won't expect." But the enemy was faster than expected. As they reached the edge of the planet's upper atmosphere, 2 fighters appeared ahead, cutting them off. Another came from behind. "We're boxed in," James said. Vera's voice turned sharp. "Can we not use the hyperdrive?" "It's damaged. We'd rip ourselves apart." She closed her eyes and took a slow breath. "Then we must make them blind." "What do you mean?" She placed her hand on the glass window. Her eyes glowed faintly. "The Sarathian mind is linked to energy. I can bend light, hide us, but only for a short time. It will drain me." James looked at her, uncertain. "Will it work?" "It must," she said simply. The Queen began to hum softly, a deep melodic sound that echoed through the cockpit. Her skin shimmered faintly, and her violet eyes turned bright like 2 small stars. The ship's lights flickered. Outside, the glow around the shuttle faded until it seemed to vanish into the dark. The enemy ships fired again, but their bolts hit only empty space. The shuttle had become invisible. James stared in awe. "You actually did it!" Her voice was weak but calm. "Do not waste time, human. Fly," he did. He pushed the shuttle hard, steering through the upper clouds into orbit. When they finally broke through the atmosphere, the stars filled the sky like a field of diamonds. But the Queen's glow dimmed. She leaned back, breathing heavily, her face pale. "It will not last long." "They will find us again soon." James glanced at her. She looked fragile now, not like a queen, but like someone who had given too much. "You saved us," he said quietly. Her lips curved slightly. "Perhaps we saved each other." After a few minutes, the radar showed no signs of pursuers. James exhaled slowly and set the ship to auto-stabilize. The silence of space surrounded them, peaceful yet heavy. Vera opened her eyes again and looked out at her planet far below. "Veralia, my home. I failed to protect it." James shook his head. "You didn't fail. The ones who ran did." She turned to him. "You do not understand, human. The Sarathian people believed their queen could never fall. I was their hope, and hope's not gone," he said quietly. "You're still here. That means there's a chance to rebuild." She looked at him, surprised by his confidence. "You speak as if survival is victory." He smiled faintly. "Sometimes it is." An alert beeped on the console. The ship's sensors picked up an approaching object. James checked the screen. "That's not an enemy signal," he said. "It's debris from one of the destroyed cruisers." He adjusted the ship's course to pass through the debris field, hoping the wreckage would hide them from enemy scanners. As they entered the field, pieces of broken metal floated all around, silent reminders of the battle's cost. Vera stared out the window. "These were my ships," she said softly. "Thousands of lives ended here." James's voice was gentle. "War doesn't care who's royal and who's not. It just takes." She looked at him with quiet sadness. "And yet you humans keep fighting it," he nodded. "Because if we don't, someone worse wins." Suddenly the radar flashed red again. "They found us!" James shouted. 3 new enemy interceptors appeared from behind the wreckage. Plasma fire lit up the darkness once more. "Hold on," he said, and threw the shuttle into a spin. The small craft dodged between chunks of broken metal. "Can you not lose them?" the Queen asked. "Working on it." He gritted his teeth as the ship scraped against a floating beam. Sparks flew. The Queen closed her eyes again, trying to use her weakened powers. But nothing happened. "The field is too strong. I cannot hide us again." "Then we'll make our own cover," James said. He spotted a massive piece of wreckage ahead. An old Sarathian battleship split in half. Its interior was hollow, big enough to hide a small shuttle. He guided their ship inside, slowing until the engines barely hummed. The interior was dark and cold, lit only by distant starlight through cracks in the hull. The enemy ships passed by, scanning but not entering. After a long moment, their signals faded away. James let out a slow breath. We did it. They lost us, Vera's voice was soft. For now. Inside the silence of the broken ship, time seemed to stop. The Queen leaned her head back, closing her eyes. James stood and walked to the back of the shuttle, checking for damage. When he returned, she spoke quietly. Tell me, human soldier, why did you stay when even my own people fled? He looked at her for a moment before answering. Because I don't run from the people I'm supposed to protect. She studied him silently. You are different from my kind. We are trained to value logic and survival above emotion. You risked your life for duty. James shrugged. Maybe that's what makes us human. We don't always do what makes sense. Her expression softened. And yet it may be the reason you win wars. He smiled slightly. Sometimes it's just the reason we live long enough to try again. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, the stars drifted slowly past the cracks of the broken ship. Finally, the Queen spoke again. You risked your life for me, a ruler of another world. I will not forget this. James looked out at the stars. Let's just get through the next day first, Your Majesty. Then you can worry about promises. For the first time since the fall of her city, Vera smiled. A small, tired smile, but real. You humans truly are strange. Yeah, he said softly. But sometimes strange is what saves the universe. The Queen looked at him, then at the stars beyond the wreckage. Somewhere out there, her enemies waited, but so did hope. And in that quiet corner of space, two survivors, one human, one alien, prepared for the long road ahead. The wreck of the Sarathian battleship floated silently through space, a graveyard of twisted metal and fading lights. Inside the hollow shell, the small shuttle remained hidden, its engines off and its windows dark. Sergeant James Arden sat near the cockpit, studying the scanner display. The radar showed nothing, no red dots, no signs of enemy ships. Yet he knew the silence was temporary. The enemy fleet would not stop searching for the Queen. Behind him, Queen Verathil Sarathis sat quietly, her elegant form half lit by the faint blue glow of the console. Her crown was gone, her robe torn, but her presence still felt regal. For the first time in her life, she was not surrounded by soldiers or servants. Only one human shared the dark with her. How long can we stay hidden here? She asked softly. James looked up from the scanner. A few hours, maybe. The wreck's metal hides our signal for now, but once their drones start scanning again, we'll be found. She sighed, lowering her eyes. They will not rest until I am captured or destroyed. James leaned back in his chair. Then we don't give them what they want. For a while, silence filled the ship. The only sounds were the soft hum of the oxygen system and the distant creak of the wreck's broken hull. The Queen finally spoke again. My people once believed we were the most powerful race in this part of the galaxy. But we were blind. We did not understand how fast others would rise. James gave a small smile. Power never lasts forever, Your Majesty. Someone always wants it more. She looked at him curiously. Your kind, humans, you have faced so many wars, and yet you keep rebuilding. Why, he thought for a moment. Because we have to. If we stop fighting, we disappear, and no one wants to be forgotten. The Queen nodded slowly as if she understood. Perhaps that is why you are so dangerous. And so loyal, James shrugged. We just don't like quitting. Suddenly, the radar beeped. A red signal blinked onto the screen. Then another and another. Contact, James said sharply. 3 enemy scouts. They're sweeping this sector. The Queen leaned forward. Can we escape? If we start the engines, they'll detect the heat right away, he said. But if we stay still, they might pass us by. They waited. The seconds felt like hours. Outside, 3 small ships glided past the wreck, shining searchlights across the broken metal. One beam passed dangerously close to their hiding place. James held his breath. He could hear the Queen breathing softly beside him. Then, without warning, one of the searchlights stopped. The enemy ship hovered, its sensors scanning the area. They found us, James muttered. He started the engines. The shuttle roared to life, breaking free of the wreck in a burst of blue flame. The enemy ships turned immediately, chasing after them. Hold on, James shouted. The shuttle spun into open space. Laser fire flashed past them like streaks of lightning. James weaved between pieces of floating debris, his hands moving quickly over the controls. The Queen gripped the seat tightly. They are faster than us. I know, he said through clenched teeth. But they don't know this ship like I do. He dived toward a nearby asteroid field. The massive rock spun slowly, forming a maze of shadows and dust. The enemy followed, firing bursts of plasma that exploded against the stones. James guided the shuttle through narrow gaps, turning hard, left and right. Each move was precise, every second counted. One of the pursuers crashed into an asteroid, its explosion lighting up the darkness. "That's one," he said with a grin. The Queen glanced at him, amazed. "You risk your life and still smile." "It helps me think," he replied, twisting the ship again, but the other two enemies were still behind them. Their scanners were stronger, tracking every move. Vera closed her eyes, reaching out with her mind. She could sense the faint thoughts of the pilots chasing them, cold, determined, mechanical. Her psychic powers were still weak, but she focused as hard as she could. Then she whispered, "Down." James didn't question her. He pulled the ship downward, diving behind a massive asteroid. The enemy ships followed, exactly as she had sensed. At that moment, she used what energy remained in her to send a psychic pulse. The pilots hesitated for just 1 second, confused by the sudden mental echo. That second was all James needed. He spun the ship around and fired 2 missiles. The explosions lit up the asteroid field like twin suns. Both enemy ships were gone. Breathing heavily, James looked at her. "Nice timing." Her eyes glowed faintly, but she was pale. "It seems we make a good team," he nodded. "You're not so bad for royalty." After the battle, the shuttle drifted silently through the asteroid shadows. They were safe again for now. James checked the ship's damage report. "Engines are holding, but we're low on fuel. We can't stay in open space much longer." The Queen's voice was calm again. "There is a hidden world not far from here, one of our old colonies. It was abandoned centuries ago, but it might still have resources." James turned his head. "Coordinates?" She closed her eyes, concentrating. "I can sense its location through the old Sarathian network. The planet's name is Nuria 9. He entered the coordinates and nodded. "Let's hope it's still friendly." As the shuttle glided toward its new course, Vera looked out at the stars. "Tell me, human, what do your people fight for? You have no empire, no great psychic powers, yet you keep standing even against the strongest." James thought for a moment. "We fight for each other, for the people who can't fight for themselves. That's enough reason for most of us." She tilted her head. "Strange. My people fought for pride, for power, for legacy. Perhaps that is why we fell so easily." He gave her a small smile. "Maybe. But pride can be rebuilt too, just on better foundations." She said nothing, but a small warmth touched her voice when she replied, "Perhaps humans will teach us that." Hours passed. The stars moved slowly outside. Both of them were tired, but neither slept. Finally, James broke the silence. "You know, I used to think aliens didn't feel things the way we do. But you care about your people. You grieve for them." Her expression softened. "We feel deeply. We just hide it better. But you, human, you show your heart too easily. You let it guide you." He smiled faintly. "Yeah, it gets us in trouble sometimes. Or it saves worlds," she said quietly. As they neared the coordinates, the scanner beeped again. Ahead, a small moon came into view. It was dark and cracked, its surface glowing faintly with blue light from old Sarathian ruins. "That's Nuria 9, she said, "once a training world for young Sarathian scholars. Now it sleeps." James stared at it. "Looks peaceful enough. Let's hope nothing there wants to kill us." He began guiding the shuttle into the atmosphere. The engines glowed orange as they entered the thin layer of clouds. The old buildings below sparkled faintly in the moonlight, tall spires and broken temples half buried in dust. The Queen's eyes softened with memory. "This place was my mother's favorite retreat. She said even a ruler must remember what silence sounds like." James nodded. "Then maybe this is the right place to start again." The shuttle touched down gently on an open platform near one of the ruins. The engines powered down, leaving only the sound of the wind whispering across the empty landscape. James stood and stretched his arms. "We'll need to check for supplies, fuel, food, anything useful." Vera rose slowly, her movements graceful despite exhaustion. "I will search the temple records. If the power systems still function, they may guide us." They stepped out of the shuttle together. The ground was covered in soft silver dust that glowed faintly under the stars. Strange plants grew through cracks in the stone. The air was thin but breathable. For the first time since the fall of her city, Queen Vera felt calm. The noise of war was far away. James looked around, rifle in hand, scanning the shadows. Not bad, he said. I've seen worse vacation spots. She glanced at him, raising an eyebrow. Vacation? He grinned. You'll get used to human humor, Your Majesty. She smiled faintly. Perhaps I already am. As they walked toward the old temple, the broken statues of past queens stood silently watching them. In that quiet place, one truth became clear to both of them. They were no longer just a soldier and a ruler. They were survivors, bound by trust and by the hope that even in the darkest parts of the galaxy, light could still be found. And as the stars shone down on the forgotten moon, James Arden and Queen Vera took their first step towards something neither of them had expected, a shared destiny that would change both their worlds forever. The shuttle landed with a rough crash that threw sparks and dust into the air. The small moon was covered in gray rocks and glowing plants that shone faintly in the dim light of a dying sun. Sergeant James Arden's hands were steady on the controls even as the engines gave a final sputter and died. The ship had done all it could. Now it was only a broken shell. Queen Verathil sat beside him in silence. Her elegant armor was scratched, her silver crown bent from the escape. For the first time in her long life, she felt small and uncertain. The mighty Sarathian Empire had fallen into chaos, and her once loyal guards had abandoned her. Only this one human remained, a man who refused to run. When the engines went cold, the quiet felt heavy. James stood first, scanning the area through the cracked cockpit window. We're safe for now, he said calmly. But the ship won't fly again. We'll have to move. Vera looked out at the barren landscape. The sky above was filled with debris, fragments of her homeworld drifting like ashes. This moon, she whispered. It was once a Sarathian outpost. Long ago, James nodded. Then maybe we can find shelter here. They gathered what little they could. A few ration packs, a plasma torch, a small power cell, and 2 pulse rifles. The queen wrapped herself in a dark cloak, hiding the glow of her royal insignia. Together, they stepped into the silent world. The ground was rough, marked by old battle scars. Strange insects scurried through glowing moss and wind howled across the ridges. They walked for hours, guided by the faint memory of an ancient map that Vera recalled from her people's archives. As the sun set, the temperature dropped sharply. The air shimmered with cold mist. We need shelter before night, James said, scanning the cliffs ahead. His human eyes caught the shadow of an old structure, the remains of a Sarathian watchtower, half buried in rock. Inside they found cracked walls, broken consoles, and old markings written in alien script. Dust lay thick over everything. James checked for power and found a weak signal. There's a small reactor here, he said. I can bring it online. Vera watched as he worked, hands steady, movements sure. His tools were basic, but his will was stronger than any machine. She felt something unfamiliar. Admiration. Within an hour, soft blue lights flickered to life and the air recyclers began to hum weakly. For the first time in days, there was warmth. They sat near the broken console as the soft light filled the room. James shared his ration packs. It's not royal food, but it'll keep you alive. Vera took the small pack, tasting it with a quiet smile. For a human soldier, you seem to know survival better than most generals. James chuckled. Out there, it's not about being strong or smart. It's about not giving up. That's something humans are good at. Vera nodded thoughtfully. Your kind strength. It is not of body, but of spirit. When others run, you stand. When all is lost, you still fight. He looked at her with a calm expression. Guess that's why I'm still here, Your Majesty. For the first time, she didn't correct him for using her title. Days passed. They repaired what they could of the old outpost. Vera used her remaining energy to connect with the planet's residual energy lines, faint traces of her people's technology buried deep below. James scavenged parts from the shuttle and built small traps to catch creatures for food. They worked together as equals, the line between queen and soldier fading slowly. One evening, as the orange light of the dying sun touched the horizon, Vera sat near the tower's entrance looking up at the stars. When I was a child, she said softly, I was told that the stars sang. My mother said if I listened closely, I could hear them tell stories of our ancestors. James sat beside her, resting his rifle across his knees.
Do you still hear them now?
She shook her head slowly. Not since the war began. The stars are silent. James looked up at the sky. Maybe they're waiting for the right story to tell again. She smiled faintly at that. And what story would that be? Maybe, he said, the story of a queen and a soldier who refused to give up, even when the galaxy turned against them. Her gaze softened. You speak like a poet, James Arden. He laughed quietly. Nah, just a soldier who's seen too much. That night, a soft alarm beeped on the damaged console. James rushed to check the display. Faint signals were approaching. Not from orbit, but from the ground. Raiders, he muttered. Scavengers or mercenaries, maybe. They picked up the energy from the reactor. Vera's eyes glowed faintly as she extended her senses. Yes, I can feel them. 6. No, 7 life forms armed. They seek something and or someone. James checked his rifle and handed her the other one. Then it's us they'll find. We can't let them get close, Vera hesitated. I have not used weapons like this in many years. He gave her a steady look. Then it's time to remember. They moved to defensive positions. James used the rocks and ruins to set up traps and mines from scavenged parts. Vera stood beside him, her cloak fluttering in the cold wind. The queen of a fallen empire, now a warrior once again. As night fell, the raiders arrived, shadowy figures moving through the mist. They spoke in rough alien tongues, searching the ruins. One of them shouted when they spotted the faint light from the tower. James took a deep breath. They're coming. Vera closed her eyes, reaching deep into her fading power. She could no longer control minds like before, but she could still sense emotions. Fear, greed, anger. She focused on those feelings and pushed them outward, making the raiders uneasy and confused. When they hesitated, James opened fire. Clean, precise shots. 2 raiders fell before they could react. The rest scattered behind rocks, returning fire wildly. Energy bolts tore through the ruins, lighting the night sky. James moved swiftly, using his training to outmaneuver them. Vera, her strength waning, managed to redirect one of the shots with a pulse of psychic force, protecting him. The battle was short, but fierce. When it ended, only silence remained. The ground smoked from the heat of the fight. James walked among the fallen, checking for survivors. They'll send more, he said quietly. We have to move again soon. Vera leaned against a rock, her breathing heavy. We fought together, she said softly. Not as ruler and soldier, but as equals. James nodded. That's how it should be. She looked up at him with calm eyes. You risk your life for me again and again. Why? He shrugged slightly. Because someone has to. Because it's the right thing to do. Vera smiled gently. Perhaps your kind truly is stronger than you appear. James looked out into the horizon where faint lights glimmered. Maybe ships, maybe just stars. And maybe yours has more heart than most think. The next day, they buried the fallen raiders in the soft dust and restored power to the tower's transmitter. Vera sent a faint coded signal into space, a message of survival, a call for allies who might still be loyal. As they watched the signal vanish into the stars, James said, If anyone's out there, they'll find us. Vera's voice was quiet but full of hope. And if not, he smiled, then we keep fighting. The queen of the Cerathians and the human soldier stood together under the strange sky of the forgotten moon, 2 survivors bound by courage and trust. Around them, the ruins whispered with the memory of old empires, and somewhere above the stars began to sing again. The morning came softly to the forgotten moon, painting the gray rocks with a pale golden light. The air was cold, the sky dim, and the silence heavy. For Queen Verathil and Sergeant James Arden, it was another day of waiting. Waiting for hope, waiting for rescue, or waiting for one final battle. The message they had sent into space had gone out 2 days ago. They didn't know if anyone had heard it. But James knew something else for certain. The raiders they had fought would not be the last. Someone would come. The galaxy was full of people chasing power, and a fallen queen was worth a fortune. James stood outside the old watchtower, scanning the horizon through his visor. The wind was sharp against his face, but his focus never wavered. The radar showed faint blips, signals growing closer. He sighed quietly and turned back toward the shelter. They're coming again, he said simply. Vera looked up from the console she had been repairing. Her silver eyes glowed faintly with inner strength. How many? Too many, James said. At least 2 ships. Maybe 3. Heavily armed. The queen stood slowly, her movements calm and graceful. Then we will meet them as we did the last, together. James gave a small smile. Wouldn't have it any other way. They spent the next few hours preparing. The old outpost was half ruined, but James made it into a fortress. He set up barriers using broken walls, placed mines in the narrow paths, and positioned his rifle where he would have a clear view of the landing zone. Vera focused on gathering what little energy remained in her body. Her psychic strength was not what it once was, but her will was unbroken. She sat in silence for a long time, eyes closed, feeling the faint heartbeat of the moon beneath her, the echoes of Sarathian technology buried deep below. When she opened her eyes, she looked different. Calm, strong, and ready. James handed her a spare rifle. "I'll take the west side. You stay near the entrance. If they break through, fall back to the reactor room." She took the weapon but shook her head. "No, I will stand beside you. A queen should not hide while another fights in her name." James smiled faintly. "You're stubborn, and you are brave," she replied. "Together, that may be enough." The first ships appeared as dark shapes against the clouds. They descended fast, engines roaring across the quiet land. Dust and wind whipped through the ruins as metal feet hit the ground. Dozens of raiders emerged, some human, some alien, all wearing scavenged armor. Their leader stepped forward, a tall alien with 4 glowing eyes and a voice like steel. "The Sarathian queen," he called out. "Surrender now and we'll spare your lives." James raised his rifle, his voice calm and clear. "You'll have to take her over my dead body." The alien laughed. "That can be arranged." The silence broke with the roar of battle. Blaster fire lit up the ruins. Energy bolts streaked across the dusty air as explosions shook the ground. James moved quickly, firing from cover, his aim precise and deadly. Every shot counted. The traps he had placed went off one by one, bright bursts of fire that tore through enemy lines. Vera stood at his side, her psychic energy forming faint waves around her hands. She pushed outward with her mind, creating barriers of shimmering light to deflect attacks. The strain showed on her face, but she did not falter. "Left side," James shouted. Vera turned and unleashed a pulse of energy, sending several raiders flying backward. The air crackled with power. She gasped, exhausted, but managed to steady herself. "You're doing great," James called, ducking behind a rock. "I will not fall," she said firmly, her voice filled with fire. The raiders advanced in waves, but the 2 defenders held their ground. Time seemed to slow. The sound of plasma fire, the rumble of explosions, the sharp commands from James as he fought like a man born for battle. Then, through the smoke, the enemy leader charged forward with a massive energy blade. He swung at James, who barely dodged, feeling the heat scorch his armor. They fought hand to hand among the ruins, sparks flying as metal clashed with metal. Vera tried to help, but another wave of raiders closed in on her. She fought them off using both her rifle and her psychic power, refusing to retreat. The effort left her trembling, her strength fading fast. James managed to disarm the leader with a quick strike, but not before the alien drove a plasma knife into his side. He gritted his teeth, pain burning through him, and tackled the alien to the ground. With one final punch, the raider fell still. James staggered, clutching his wound, blood staining his armor. "James!" Vera cried, rushing to his side. He smiled weakly. "Still alive," he said between breaths. "Can't get rid of me that easy." She helped him back to his feet. "You have done enough. Let me handle the rest." But James shook his head. "No, we finish this together." The remaining raiders began to retreat, realizing their leader was gone. But before they could escape, the sky above roared again. A fleet of ships appeared, and this time not enemies. The ships bore the symbols of both humans and Sarathians. Vera's eyes widened in disbelief. The signal. They heard it. A voice came over James's communicator. "This is Commander Doran of the Allied fleet. We received your distress call. Hold your position. We're coming in hot." Moments later, friendly troops descended, surrounding the last of the raiders and forcing them to surrender. The battle was over. James collapsed to one knee, the adrenaline fading. Vera caught him before he fell completely. "Stay with me," she said, her voice trembling for the first time. He looked up at her and managed a faint smile. "Told you we'd make it." "You foolish human," she whispered softly. "You saved me again." Hours later, the medics treated James's wounds inside the rescue ship. Vera stood beside him, no longer a queen running from war, but a leader reborn through courage and loss. When the commander approached, He saluted. Your Majesty, the Alliance stands ready to serve. The human fleet and the Sarathian survivors are united under your name. Vera turned to James, who was resting on a stretcher. It was not my name that brought us here, she said quietly. It was his, James chuckled softly. Don't give me that much credit. But the Queen shook her head. You taught me something I had forgotten. That true strength is not in armies or empires, but in the heart of those who refuse to surrender. He smiled faintly. Guess humans aren't so bad after all. Vera looked out the window of the ship where the stars shone bright again. No, she said softly. Humans are extraordinary. Months later, peace slowly returned to the galaxy. The Sarathian Empire began to rebuild, not as rulers but as allies. Humans and Sarathians worked side by side to restore what was lost. At the center of the new capital stood a great monument, a statue carved from crystal and steel. It showed a human soldier standing firm, shield raised, beside an alien queen reaching toward the stars. Beneath it, the words were written in both languages: strength through unity, hope through courage. Every visitor who passed the statue heard the story of how a queen was left alone, and one human soldier refused to abandon her. And somewhere, far from the noise of politics and history, Sergeant James Arden and Queen Vera Thill walked together under the stars, no longer just survivor and protector, but friends who had changed the galaxy forever.